Nevdun Boyajian, my grandfather, was born in Armenia in 1896. His family fled from the Turkish genocide campaigns in the late 1800s. They made their way to America via Cyprus, Greece, and Alexandria, Egypt. Ned was the son of Armenian rug merchants. His father, Bedros Boyajian, and 3 brothers established an Oriental rug shop on Fifth Avenue in New York City in the early 1900s. These are the eyes of my grandfather, Nevdun Boyajian. These eyes tell me stories I hope to hear someday. I see a terrain of ferocious beauty, rough-hewn temples seemingly erupted straight from the earth, and homesteads sculpted into a sheer cliff. I see people who left their footprints in the dust of this place, whose features resemble mine. I hear their footsteps through Ned's eyes. A reading from Black Dog of Fate by Peter Balakian. In the summer of 1915 in Diyarbakir, every day you heard about Armenians disappearing. Shopkeepers disappearing from their shops in the middle of the day. Children not returning from school. Men not coming back from the melon fields. Women, especially young ones, disappearing as they returned from the bath. The pastry shop on Al-Bak Street had been robbed and burned. The carpet store near the mosque had been broken into and cleaned out. Farms in the outlying valley had been stripped of their goats and sheep by Kurdish bandits. In the middle of the day, a teacher at the Armenian school, Kanjan, was shot to death. No reasons given, no action taken. Mr. Kanjan's body was thrown in a wagon and driven around the market square. One morning shortly after that, my father said that we would be leaving for our summer house the next day, and so I worked all day wrapping walnuts to make pastik and baking bread and ironing. I went to bed early and was ready to get up at dawn. My riding dress was hanging on the coat rack in my room. In the middle of the night, there was a knock on the door. Everyone in the house woke up. It was a loud knock, and I heard the voice of a Turkish soldier who was shouting loudly. Finally, my father answered the door. The soldiers entered the foyer, and I could hear their boots click on the tiles. I stood by the inside of my bedroom door and listened. I could not hear what was being said because my father was a soft-spoken man. Then I heard footsteps and some clicking of boots on the tiles, and the front door closed. It was a big door made of walnut, and it had a round silver knocker, and when it closed, the knocker slapped the door. Then there was silence, and not one of us, my brother Hagop, my sister Tekoy, or my mother, or our servant Dikran, made a move. I went back to bed and lay, watching the candlelight flicker against the wall, watching the wall turn to purple as the dawn hit it, and the next thing I knew, I was wakened by a scream that was my mother's voice. I put on my riding dress and hurried downstairs. I ran into the courtyard through the foyer and found my mother lying unconscious on the green and black tiles. Then I saw an object sticking through the door and something that looked like a horseshoe. I walked over to the door and pushed it open. I saw that 2 horseshoes were nailed to 2 feet, and my eye followed the feet to the ankles, which were covered in blood, and then to the knees, which looked disjointed. I looked up to the genitals, which were just a mound of blood, above which long, snake-like lacerations rose up the abdomen to the chest. The hands were nailed horizontally on a board, which was meant to resemble a cross. The hands were clenched like claws around big spikes of iron driven into the board. The shoulders were remarkably clean and white, and the throat had a fringe of beard along the last inch of the body. There was nothing else on the cross. They had left the head near the steps to our house. I could see his nose propped on the step. I could see the beard trimmed neatly along the cheekbones. I could see it was my father. I walked out of our courtyard through the doorway where my father's crucified body had been left and into the street. I decided not to put on my charshaf. It did not matter anymore. Everyone seemed to know who was Armenian. We were marked, and I felt for the first time how false our names were, how the Turks had stripped us of that too. None of us had Armenian names anymore, only patronymics that were attached to Turkish designations. They had stolen our cooking, our art, our buildings, our bodies. Their whole culture was a theft. I walked out into the street on that day, late in July, hating my name. What do I see in these eyes? As a child, I saw only the bushiest of eyebrows, shielding the twinkle of love for a small girl. We played 1, 2, 3, owl eyes, opening mine into his, holding the gaze for as long as I could before dissolving into giggles.